Carly from High Country Homesteading, and Easter is coming up soon, so I wanted today to show you everything that I'm going to be cooking from scratch for Easter. So today we have 7 items that we're going to be making. For our main course, we're having a honey glazed ham. For our sides, we're going to be doing deviled eggs, tabbouleh, potatoes au gratin, roasted asparagus, sourdough rolls, and for dessert, we're having a carrot cake. And we're going to be making all these things from scratch, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to be doing it for Easter this year. So there's a few things that I did get started last night just to help us have an easier and smoother day today. So a couple of those things that I did last night was I started my sourdough rolls, which you can absolutely do all of this on the same day, but particularly if you're doing sourdough, you will need to start your dough the night before because it needs to sit out and ferment overnight. That's the point of sourdough. If you want to do it same day, then you would be using an instant yeast. So it's just nice if you don't have yeast on hand, that sourdough is an option. And another thing that I did last night was I went ahead and I hard boiled my eggs. I have those sitting in the fridge and they will be ready for us to make deviled eggs today. So we just got that neatly out of the way. And then the last thing I did was bake my carrot cake. And the reason I did this is because it's nice to have your layers very cold before you ice it. So all we have to do today is make the icing and assemble our cake, ice it, and then our carrot cake will be good to go. So doing those couple of things last night didn't take very long and they were easy to do, and we already have those out of the way. So today we can focus on mostly hot dishes and things that are going to take a little bit more time.
Heading back in time to the day before, I fed my sourdough starter with flour and water, which you're going to want to do this anywhere between about 4 to 12 hours before you want to use it, because that's going to activate your starter. It's going to get it all nice and bubbly so that it will allow your bread items to rise. So I'm mixing this up earlier in the day, and then later that night is when we're going to mix together our sourdough bread rolls. First thing I did in the evening time is get out my trusty Instant Pot. I'm telling you, if you have an Instant Pot and you have never tried boiling eggs in it, I absolutely encourage you to do so. You can put as many as 1 egg in here. You can fill the whole pot with 4 dozen eggs. I'm not sure exactly how many fit, but I have tried it all different ways. And all you have to do is put in about a cup of water, set it for 5 minutes on high pressure, and you are good to go. And once those eggs were done cooking, I just put them in a bowl of ice water just to stop the cooking process and also cool them down, because number one, they're way easier to handle when they're cool, and also this will help make the shells slide off. And if you see me doing that right here, these slide off absolutely perfectly, and it's very important, especially for deviled eggs, to keep the integrity of the shape of the egg, because you don't want them to rip apart or else they won't hold the filling. So doing the eggs in the Instant Pot every single time gets me these perfectly beautiful eggs, and the shell just peels off so nicely, because I know that can be such a pain in the butt sometimes, but I'm telling you, every single time it turns out wonderful, no matter if the eggs are new, old. You don't need any vinegar. I know there's so many different techniques, but this has not failed me ever. So I highly recommend using the Instant Pot if you have it, but boiling on the stove is a perfectly fine option as well. So I've gone and emptied out my bowl, and I'm just putting these eggs back in. I'm going to cover them up and put them in the fridge until we're ready for them tomorrow. Next up, I'm prepping my cake tins. I just use the butter and flour method to grease my cake tins. You can use a nonstick spray, you can use parchment paper, whichever way you prefer. This is just the way that I've always done it, and I did not have any problems getting my cakes out later after they were cooked. So in a medium-sized bowl, we're going to add our dry ingredients. We're going to add 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon. And just give that a good whisk until everything is mixed up. In another bowl, I'm going to add our wet ingredients. I have a cup of lightly packed brown sugar, a cup of granulated sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, 1 cup of melted coconut oil, and I'm going to give that a really good mix, and then we'll start adding our eggs one at a time, mixing in between each egg. Next, I'm getting out my food processor. You could certainly use a hand grater for this, but the food processor is just going to make things much easier using the shred attachment. And I'm starting out with about 5 medium to small size carrots. They're really not that wide, and I did end up going to grab 2 more, I think. But in total, we're looking for about 3 cups of shredded carrots. Once you have your 3 cups, we're going to fold in our dry ingredients to the wet and just make sure that that's well incorporated. And then we're going to mix in our 3 cups of shredded carrots. This is also the time where if you want to add any other things like chopped nuts are a popular option, or raisins, you can mix that in at this point as well. Now, on this particular night, I was missing one of my cake pans, which I do not recommend. Definitely try to do both at the same time. It will save you a lot of time and effort, but I could only find one. So I just used half of the batter to fill my cake pan. Definitely use half to fill one and half to fill two. And we are going to pop those in a 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes. The last thing we'll be mixing up tonight is our sourdough bread rolls. So in my KitchenAid mixer, I'm adding in a 1/4 cup of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 cup of melted butter, 3/4 cup of warm water, and half a cup of our sourdough starter. Now this is Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone's recipe. I use all of her recipes when I make sourdough items, and I will leave a link in the description below of this particular one. I started out with 2 cups of all-purpose flour and then let this start mixing at a medium speed. I did end up adding half a cup of flour a little bit later into it since the dough was looking a little bit sticky. After about 10 minutes of mixing, the dough is done, and I just removed the dough for a minute and greased the bowl and then put my dough back in, and I'm just going to put some plastic wrap over it and let it sit out all night until I am ready to do the second rise in the morning. Here's my carrot cake out of the oven looking nice and spongy. It comes out clean with a fork, and this was after exactly 35 minutes. And once both of my layers were baked up and cooled all the way down, I moved on to wrapping each of them in plastic wrap. Just wrap them up really well, and then I put them in the fridge overnight so that they would be nice and cool when we iced them tomorrow.
First, we're going to start with our sourdough rolls because they are going to need to rise, probably take an hour or 2, maybe more, depending on how warm your home is. But this is what our dough is looking like now. It's been sitting overnight with the plastic wrap on. Let's see, it's been about 12 hours since this was made, a little bit more. And it's definitely doubled in size. So what we're gonna do, we have our clean surface. We're gonna take our pastry cutter and we're going to just flip this dough out, and we're gonna cut it into 8 pieces to make our 8 rolls. So I'm just going to evenly stretch this out and try to make 8 even pieces out of it. So I'll cut it down the middle first. Cut it in half. and then cut each section in half again. So we have our 8 pieces, and I'm just going to roll these just into little dough balls like this. And then I have a greased 9x13 dish here, and we're just going to place them in the dish and let them rise. They will double in size, and then we will throw them in the oven when they're ready to be cooked. So here we have our 8 dough balls, and I'm just going to cover this with a towel. I'll probably just sit it on the oven to let them rise. It will probably take an hour or 2, and we're gonna wait until they're about double in size before we put them in the oven. So now that our rolls are rising, I'm gonna get started on the tabbouleh. So what I have here is bulgur wheat. And this is actually just a tip if you are planning on making this. I could not find this in my local grocery store, so I had to order it online. So if this is a last minute menu item for you, you may not be able to do it unless you think ahead a few days. So just wanted to let you know, I got this online from Walmart, but there were also lots of options on Amazon. I just couldn't find it in the grocery store.
First, to a bowl, I'm measuring out a cup of our bulgur wheat, and then I'm adding in a cup and a half of boiling water. I used my kettle, but you can certainly boil water on your stove. So I'm going to mix that up, apply the lid, and this is going to sit out for about 45 minutes, and then we will put it in the refrigerator for about an hour or until we're ready to incorporate the rest of the ingredients.
Next, we're breaking out our food processor. We're going to be using this a few times today. And we're going to be using it to chop all of our parsley. So here I have 3 bunches of parsley. This is the curly kind. I have some green onion, 2 tomatoes, and we're also going to need a little bit of mint, as well as some lemon juice, olive oil, salt and pepper. So I'm gonna make sure that everything is washed, and then we're gonna chop all of it up into tiny pieces. So my camera conveniently wasn't recording using the food processor just now, but I took some of this parsley and I put it in the food processor and just blitzed it until it was chopped up a bit more. You could definitely hand chop your parsley, but I like to have it in fine pieces because we're gonna be serving this with large pieces of lettuce to make like a lettuce wrap. So I like to have everything chopped pretty finely, but right now I'm going to hand chop the onions and the tomatoes, also the mint. You could have thrown the mint in with the parsley as well to get that fine, but because the tomatoes will just get obliterated in the food processor. So I have about 2 cups of chopped parsley here. So we're gonna set that aside, clean this up, and start cutting the rest of our vegetables. It's times like these where I'm glad I finally have a compost jar sitting over there by my sink. So we can put tops of tomatoes, extra parsley, bits on the onion that we're not going to eat into the compost jar, and we can feed our garden this year and hopefully give us more tomatoes and more onions and more parsley. I'm very, very excited about it. I have my seeds all started behind the camera. I have a few more sets that I need to get started next week, and then we're going to be able to start planting things in the ground soon, which I'm very happy about. In this region where I am, I'm zone 6B, I believe. So I'm probably looking at planting things in the ground around May 1st. But There are a few things that are more cold hardy, like spinach and kale, carrots and beets, things like that, that like the cold a little better, that I can actually get started on April 1st. So I'm very excited to have something actually planted in the ground outside, although we still have a lot to do when it comes to actually building the garden beds. So all those things are gonna have to go in my existing beds, and after we get done with our chicken coop, which is very, very soon, it's full force on the garden because we gotta get those things in the ground. So I'm very excited for that coming up. Now I didn't grow up with Easter, so everything that I'm cooking here are really things that my mother-in-law has made me over the years. So these are the things that I'm used to, especially the tabbouleh is a family cultural dish that his grandmother always made for Easter. And so once I started having holidays with my husband's family, tabbouleh was always served, and it is so delicious and refreshing, and it's honestly, I feel like a much preferred way to serve a salad because it's still, you're still having the lettuce in the lettuce wraps, you've got chopped tomato, parsley, onion. Instead of having a big leafy salad, it's so light and just honestly refreshing. And with the lemon juice and the olive oil, it's a bit of a dressing. And the bulgur is so tiny, but it just makes it a little more filling. So you could have it completely in a meal by itself. But I feel like it's just another way to have a salad option without having just a big leafy salad. So if you've never tried it before, I would really highly recommend that you do. Just gonna thinly slice these green onions. Don't need too much, but it just adds a nice onion flavor to the salad. And then lastly, we're gonna put in a little bit of mint. Like I said, I would really consider this dish refreshing is the best adjective I could use to describe it, and mint is perfect in something like that. I highly recommend, if you've never grown herbs, you try mint. Mint has always been very successful for me, even when I have no idea what I'm doing. Mint and basil are always high producers for me before I even had a clue about gardening.
For the tabbouleh dressing, I'm going to start with a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Now, if you like lemon like me, you might want to add a little bit more than this, but go ahead and start with just a 1/4 cup and see how you like the taste at the end. I'm also going to be adding a 1/4 cup of olive oil, about a teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to mix this up and pour it over our parsley, onion, tomato mixture. And once that's complete, you will just put a lid on your bowl and set it in the fridge for about 2 hours. And later, once all the refrigeration is done, we're going to combine the bulgur with the rest of the salad, and then you will be done.
So when you get a ham from the store, it's probably going to look like this in the netting. This is about a 7-pound ham. So I'm just going to cut this netting off. And it'll come most likely with its own glaze packet. But this is pretty much cornstarch and corn syrup, and it's just too easy to make your own with way better ingredients, so I'm going to show you how to do that on the stove. But this is how your ham is going to look. So I'm going to spray this with some olive oil. And we're gonna get this in our dish. The oven is set to 275, and we're gonna cook this to start about 10 minutes per pound. And this is a 7-pound, so I'm probably gonna start with an hour and see where it's at, because I definitely don't want to overcook it. So this one's already sliced, as you can see, and it's bone in. So we're gonna put the cut side down, and then we're gonna cover this with tin foil and put it in the oven for about an hour. Now we're gonna fire up the oven and start tackling the ham. I'm just going to leave these rolls on the oven while it heats up, because that will help them to rise. And I'll use my burner over here. We're gonna make the honey glaze for the ham on the stovetop first. Pour it over the ham, and then we'll put it in the oven. For the honey glaze, we're gonna start with melting a 1/4 cup of butter. Next, we're gonna add in a cup of packed brown sugar. Along with about 1/2 cup of honey. And 2 tablespoons of Dijon mustard. And whisk that together on medium heat. To this, we're gonna mix in just a good pinch of garlic powder and paprika. Give it a stir, and then we're going to let this cook and thicken for about 5 minutes. So while we're waiting for our ham to cook in the oven, we can knock out some of our colder dishes. So next I'm gonna get started on the deviled eggs. Deviled eggs are my absolute favorite thing to make. They've always been a hit. Potluck, family dinners, picnics, any event, I always bring the deviled eggs. Everybody loves them, everybody flocks to them. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to make your own mayonnaise first. This is something that I've just started doing recently. Now that we have chickens, I wanted to make sure that I knew how to make a couple more things with eggs than I did before. And one of those things that you can do to replace store-bought mayonnaise is use eggs from your own chickens to make your own mayonnaise. So we're only going to use 1 egg, but I can make my own mayonnaise now. I don't have to buy that at the store, and I'm very excited about it, and it tastes delicious. So all you need, honestly, is 1 egg. I have a cup of avocado oil here. I also have some Dijon mustard, and you're gonna need a little bit of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar. I honestly haven't tried it with others, but any vinegar will do. We're also breaking out the trusty food processor again. I've just washed it from using parsley. And we are going to combine the mustard, the vinegar, the egg, and then we are going to slowly pour in our oil until it thickens and thickens. You may also want to add salt or any spices you'd like at the end of this, but honestly, the avocado oil I find has quite a salty taste, and you may not even need salt at all. Or you can add the salt to the actual deviled eggs filling on that end. So that's probably what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna keep the salt out of the mayonnaise, and I will just add it to the deviled eggs. So let's get everything into our food processor, and I'll show you how to do the mayonnaise for the deviled eggs. So to the food processor, we're gonna add our 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of vinegar, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, and I'm going to mix this briefly, and then we're going to slowly pour in our oil. Okay, Okay, now with this off, I'm just going to put it on low and pour in this oil. All right, let's take a look. So now we have creamy mayonnaise. I'm going to give this a little bit longer to get it to thicken up just a little bit more, and then we can put it in our deviled eggs. So here are our beautiful eggs from last night. Deviled eggs can be a bit time consuming start to finish, especially if you're making a lot. But I'm really happy that we did this last night so that this step is already taken care of, and now we can just make the filling. So first what I'm going to do is slice all of these in half lengthwise. And then I'm going to pop all of the yolks into a bowl. Now the thing about deviled eggs is you have to be very gentle. They are very delicate, but I will say that if you put them in the fridge overnight like I have, they are a lot sturdier rather than when they've been freshly cooked and they're a little on the warm side. These don't feel as delicate as they could be now that they've had time to solidify in the fridge. They hold their shape a little better. But still, be as gentle as you can, because that's the thing about eggs. If you were making an egg salad or just chopping them up in some way, it wouldn't matter if the eggs ripped or if they were broken during the cooking process. But for deviled eggs, you really want to keep the integrity and shape of the egg as best as you can, because that's the entire presentation. All right, so I'm just going to take a spoon and start mashing these down a little bit so that it's easier to mix. All right, when it comes to the filling for the deviled eggs, it's really hard to give measurements because it's honestly just a feeling. So basically all you're gonna do is put in some yellow mustard and your mayonnaise, and you're gonna continuously mix those together until you feel like it's the right consistency. So I just honestly start with a good amount, and I typically feel like I end up needing more than I initially put.
So I accidentally went way too ham with the mustard and mayonnaise here. I shouldn't have been talking and doing at the same time, but start with a little bit, not like me, and add as you go. These turned out way too runny, and usually the filling is a lot thicker.
So we're going to start with equal amounts mayonnaise and mustard, and we're just going to mix that up. Now you want this to be a pretty creamy consistency. The eggs yolks are quite dry. And for putting in the center of each of these, you want it to be creamy and not dry. So once you've done your initial mayonnaise and mustard, give it a taste test. Okay, if that's to your liking, now I'm gonna add salt, pepper, and some onion powder to taste. Let's do a good sprinkle of salt, some pepper, and I like to add a bit of onion powder. I know it's pretty common in deviled eggs to probably add some dill. I just keep it really simple with these couple of things, and they're truly a hit every time. You can get fancy and put bacon on top, all kinds of things. Deviled eggs are honestly the best, and I've never met somebody who hates them. All right, another taste test. and that is good to go. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a spoonful of filling, and we're just going to fill every egg and be pretty generous. Depending on what crowd you're feeding, maybe some people don't like them that full. Some people only want a little. You just do what feels right. I do highly recommend though filling these on a different plate, or like I'm using a cutting board right now, but process can get a little messy, especially because we're going to sprinkle paprika over these. So if you want your presentation to be nice, I would recommend filling them and sprinkling the paprika somewhere else, and then putting them on a clean plate or dish that you're going to present the final product on. If you want to be really fancy, you can put this filling in a piping bag, like you're icing a cake, with like a piping tip on it, and you can pipe the filling inside the holes. But I don't have time for that personally, and maybe on the day of making this you do, maybe you don't. That's totally fine. In my experience, people eat them either way. All right, last step for deviled eggs, and I insist you don't skip this, is sprinkling on some smoked paprika. It gives it such a nice color difference. And the paprika is so good. You can leave them off of some if you have people who may be adverse to it, but I really think deviled eggs are not complete without paprika on top. And there we are. To finish off our carrot cake, we're gonna make a traditional cream cheese frosting. So I've got my KitchenAid out here. You can do this in the food processor as well. I just have this already, and we've washed that one a few times. So for something sweet, I'm gonna put it in here. I have the whisk attachment on. And what we're gonna need is we're gonna need 16 ounces of cream cheese. So that's typically 2 of the typical 8-ounce blocks. We're also gonna add half a cup of softened butter, which is 1 stick. We're gonna cream this together on a medium speed until it's smooth, and then we're gonna add just a couple more things. Once that's been whipped together well, we're gonna add about a teaspoon of vanilla, a pinch of salt, and add 4.5 cups of powdered sugar, about a half cup at a time. All right, we've taken our ham out of the oven, and the thermometer says that it's done. So if your ham didn't already come scored, you're gonna wanna, with a knife, just make some cuts into your ham so that the glaze has places to sink into. And now we will take our glaze and we're gonna pour it all over. If you have a brush, you can also make sure you brush it into all of those scores that you made. And then we're gonna pop this back in the oven for about 10 minutes. So the next thing that needs to go in the oven is the potatoes au gratin. So normally in America I would say au gratin, but I think everything sounds lovelier in French, and French would say au gratin. The only difference actually between this and scalloped potatoes is scalloped potatoes is just a cream sauce, but to make it au gratin, you add cheese. So that's what we're gonna do today. And these are some gold potatoes. I have 5 here, varying sizes. I tried to pick the largest ones that I saw. So I have peeled these, and I'm going to use my food processor. Again, I've got the fine slicer that I'm going to put facing up. And then we are going to feed these potatoes through and get them sliced. May need to cut these so they fit into your food processor. That was easy enough. Absolutely thinly sliced by hand, but as always, it's going to take you a while. But these are now nice thin pieces. Perfect for our dish. So I have a casserole dish here to spray down well with olive oil, or you can butter your dish. And we're going to put about half of our potatoes down in the first layer. And spread them out. So I'm getting a good layer down in my potatoes. Trying to spread them out pretty evenly. Then we're going to season this layer with a little bit of salt and pepper. And then here I have some thinly sliced onions that I'm just going to sprinkle over the top. And then we will add the rest of our sliced potatoes. Look how beautifully thin that made it. Alright, second layer on, and then one more sprinkle of salt and pepper on this layer. So now we're going to shred the cheese to go over the potatoes. I cleaned out yet again my food processor, and now I have the finely shredded side facing up. And we're going to do about a cup of cheddar and a cup of Gruyere. Alright, now we are going to head to the stove and make our cheese sauce. For our cheese sauce, we're going to make a roux. So we're going to melt equal parts butter and then mix equal parts flour into that. So that's about 3 tablespoons. Here's our ham all done. We're going to crank the oven up to 400 degrees for the potatoes. To your butter, you're going to add the flour, 1 tablespoon at a time, and mix constantly really well so that all the flour will disappear. And then we're slowly going to mix in 2 cups of whole milk. Constantly whisking.
For some reason I missed myself adding in the cheese, but you're going to add in your shredded cheddar and Gruyere to the milk after that was mixed in, and then you're just going to pour the whole cheesy cream sauce over top of the potatoes, put it in the oven at 400 degrees, and that's going to cook for about an hour. So now that we have an hour for potatoes cooking, it's a good time to get our cold items prepared. So next what I'm going to do is unwrap my cake layers, and we are going to ice our carrot cake. So for right now, I just have it set down on a plate. I don't have one of those fancy cake spinners for icing and decorating. But I'm just adding a cream cheese frosting layer to the top of the first layer, and we will put our second layer on top of that so it sticks. And then cover the top and sides with the rest of your frosting. You can ice this any way you want. I just honestly did a rough, decent amount of coverage. Didn't try to make it very smooth. Didn't try to make it completely opaque. I think this is sometimes called a crumb coating when you have your cake layers kind of peeking through the icing. But I just slathered it on basically, and then with my leftover icing, I put some food coloring in to make orange and green for a carrot, and decided to do just a little bit of a novice carrot design. So as was said before, the last step for our tabbouleh is just to combine the bulgur wheat into the rest of our vegetable mixture. So I'm just adding that in now that they're nice and cool from being in the fridge. And we're mixing that all together, and this will just be covered sitting in the fridge until we're ready to eat. And typically I serve this with lettuce leaves to make basically like a lettuce wrap. That is the way that we've always enjoyed it. So I have some cold lettuce leaves in the fridge as well, and then we will put those out when we serve our meal. So the final step for our sourdough bread rolls is I'm going to just crack an egg in a dish, mix it up, and we are going to put an egg wash on top of our rolls. This is just going to help with a browning color, and we're going to set our rolls now that our potatoes are cheesy and delicious and bubbling. Just going to set our rolls in oven at 375 degrees, and those are going to bake for about 25 minutes. The very last step is one more vegetable side. So just to give us a little bit more green and have a hot side dish, I'm just going to roast up some asparagus. I've snapped about the bottom 2 inches off, the tough part, and mixed it up in some olive oil, sprinkle some salt and pepper, and that's really all you have to do. You can add Parmesan cheese on top if you like that as well, but just for a simple side dish, I kept it simple like this.
Thank you so much for spending your time with me today as we cooked this full meal from scratch for Easter this year. This is really honestly just the perfect meal for any kind of gathering for friends and family. In the springtime, in the summer, all delicious, comforting foods that I think everybody will enjoy. And I hope you saw that it was pretty simple to cook all of these things from scratch, and we only just use a couple easy tools that we use multiple times. I'm not kidding. If you don't have a food processor, I think now's the time you should run out and get one. We've used it in countless ways. I honestly lost count for practically every dish here, except maybe the asparagus. But we really was easy, not difficult. We prepped a little last night, and then we made this beautiful meal today that everybody can enjoy. So as always, I will leave all of the links to the recipes down in the description box below the video. And I would just absolutely love if you would comment and let me know what you traditionally cook for Easter, and if you think you might want to try any of these items that we made today. If you enjoyed cooking along with me and learning how to cook some new things from scratch just like I am, I would really love if you would subscribe. We have so many projects coming up now that it's spring, especially the garden. Our chicken coop is almost done with our chickens, and so much more cooking and canning and harvesting from the garden and flowers, and I'm just so excited to do it all. And I hope that you will learn along with me. So please consider subscribing. I hope you have an amazing holiday, and I'll see you next time. Bye.